In this video, I'm going to show you some of my findings from shooting some test footage with a new Greatjoy 35mm T2.9 1.8x anamorphic lens. Most of what you'll see was recorded on the Lumix S1H because it allows us to use the full width of its full frame sensor and shows how much the lens covers. Greatjoy recommends full frame only in 4:3 anamorphic mode or just with a super 35mm crop. But for the purposes of this test, I've shot wider with a 3:2 aspect ratio. You'll have noted already, no doubt, that the flare created when a light shines towards the front of the lens is extremely moderate compared to the fireworks and drama we usually see with low-cost anamorphics. There are few signs of those horizontal streaks across the frame with this lens, as bright light sources are more likely to produce starburst effects even with a wide-open aperture. The lens adds no colour when flare is created, and the colours that appear are entirely dependent on the colour of the light source itself. In this clip, some flare is recorded as the camera turns towards the streetlights, but it takes a powerful light falling directly on the front element to induce it. You can see too in this shot, the lights in the distance give off a starburst effect that can look like dragonflies in flight. They've picked up a purple-blue tint that's more to do with the white balance than any colour added by the lens. They're quite attractive, but may not be what people expect to get. While filming a group of girls chatting, I began to notice something unusual about the way bright areas in defocused backgrounds are rendered. Pulling the focus closer shows off the appearance of vertical streaks inside the bright defocused background areas that seem to extend the balcony railings up and down in this shot. Out in the wild during daylight hours, it is only the wide aspect and the slightly unusual rendering of out of focus areas that lets on this isn't a spherical lens cropped down to a letterbox format. Of course, using the full height of the sensor packs more pixels into the de-squeezed frame than we'd get if we just cropped, but I'm not certain the resolution style of this lens lets all of those extra pixels seen. Detail is reproduced without the bite of a regular lens, and with a slightly distorted softness to it. When used on the Lumix S1H in 3:2 mode, it's possible to get a really nice wide view that crops into a 2.4:1 aspect ratio without too much corner shading. You'll need to be careful with screw-in filters though, as the width of the view will inevitably include even the thinnest mount, as you may note in a few of these frames. The solution is to either stop down to get your exposure without NDs, or to use the lens as Greatjoy suggests, with a 4:3 or super 35mm area of the sensor. I love the width of the frame though, and for some applications would be happy to live with a touch of vignetting or to crop a little more in post to get rid of it. Focusing at a close distance for this ferocious dog, I again noticed something unusual in the way out of focus areas in the distance are reproduced. While the dog and its fur look fine, the lady behind and the beach huts in the middle of the frame don't appear as they would with a regular anamorphic lens. They seem to have a vertical texture about them, which I'll investigate a little bit more in a moment. I hadn't really noticed too much curvilinear distortion in normal shooting, but it becomes more obvious when shooting graphic shapes that are close to the camera. You can see here there's a good deal of barreling going on horizontally, but not very much vertically. It's most pronounced in objects closer to the camera, and doesn't create dramatic shape shifts when the camera pans, but it's still visible in straight-edged subjects at normal distances too. Although Greatjoy says it's eliminated breathing in the lens, the reality is that it's just significantly reduced. When racking from close to distant focus positions at a normal speed, there really isn't much evidence of shape shifting at all, but speed that footage up to 400% and the changes in magnification become clearer. The constant squeeze factor is also not entirely constant, but it's close enough. Greatjoy has cleverly reversed the slip from 1.8 times so that it is distant focus that reduces the squeeze rather than close focus. So it will be scenery rather than faces that will appear fat in your footage. Good thinking. The drop is tiny though, maybe 1.77 times. As I've mentioned previously, there's something very unusual about the way out of focus areas are rendered by this lens. The apparent perpendicular alignment of the anamorphic groups seems to give us a vertical smearing of details and highlights, so we get an odd upright grid effect. The effect is subtle, but still there in wide aperture shots, but it becomes more apparent when we close down a little. At T5.6, there is definitely something distracting about the background, but at T16, the background is focused and the effect goes away. You can see in the picture of this printed text, though, that the red numbers in the table blend with those on the lines above and below to form a red squiggly vertical line. The white lanterns here also stop being round when they're out of focus and become lines as they get distorted up and down the frame. I compared the effect with that of the Greatjoy 50mm from the same set to see what it looks like next to a normal anamorphic rendering. And while the subjects are different sizes in the frame due to the different focal lengths, it's still possible to see that the rendering of out of focus areas is quite different between the two lenses. The way the 35mm creates upright lines makes the background much busier and attention-seeking, while backgrounds shot with the 50mm are quieter, more organic and smoother. Which is better will be a matter of personal preference.